LANFGX is a networking panel, how to set up LAN networks. My name is Dan Frank, and I'm going to kick it right on over to our moderator, Jared Tyndall. Thanks, Jared.
Hey, LFGX, this is Jared Tyndall, aka Killer. We're going to talk to you today about how to set up a LAN for a large networking event and what goes into that, what hardware you need, what do you need to watch for while you're running it, and everything you need to know about how to set up a mid-size LAN party. We'll start off with a little bit of an introduction. I'm the events team lead for LANFest. I've been doing this for, 15 years. So I know very well that a bad LAN can ruin events. And a good LAN, you don't even notice it. So why don't we go ahead and kick this off? Let's start with Lee. Why don't you go ahead?
Welcome, everybody, to our first panel for LFGX is a networking panel, how to set up LAN networks. My name is Dan Frank, and I'm going to kick it right on over to our moderator, Jared Tyndall. Thanks, Jared.
Hey, LFGX, this is Jared Tyndall, aka Killer. We're going to talk to you today about how to set up a LAN for a large networking event and what goes into that, what hardware you need, what do you need to watch for while you're running it, and everything you need to know about how to set up a mid-size LAN party. We'll start off with a little bit of an introduction. I'm the events team lead for LANFest. I've been doing this for, 15 years. So I know very well that why don't we go ahead and kick this off? Let's start with Lee. Why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about your experience?
We're starting with me. That's not what you said earlier, but no. Anyway, I work. The short answer is I help out with Infernal LAN and ECL, which are in Washington State. I also have previously done LFGX's in-person networking, and I play a network engineer on TV or something.
I know.
Pull it off.
Definitely not a easy job at times, but I greatly enjoy it, and I always get time to play games. Uh, Other than that, I do some network engineering and installs and management on the side, and my day job is doing help desk work and essentially wearing many hats. Name a task that involves IT, I'd probably do it.
Cool. And last but not least, we have Anthony.
How's it going? I'm Anthony. I run the Chicago event of LANFest. I've been doing LAN parties in Chicago for about the past 6 years, and then attending them for at least the last 10, 15, if not longer. And my day job is I'm a system engineer for 911 dispatcher, or 911 dispatch center in the northern suburbs of Chicago.
Very cool. Okay, to start things off, just kind of give us a general overview of what it takes to plan out a LAN for a 200 plus person event.
Well, I would say the first thing you need to know is that 200 plus. You want to know how many users you're going to have at your event, and I generally start with, well, how much bandwidth do I need, and can I get that? Then from there, the knowing that user count also lets me know kind of an idea of what I need for switches. But that's not the end of the story for equipment, because another thing that dictates what equipment you need is the layout. So get your hands on power and layout diagrams if they already exist, and if they don't, you need to be working with people to get those made. So
yeah, I would say 9 times out of 10, the driver of making a layout diagram is the networking team at a LAN, because we care about where things land. We also care about power, depending on what you're using. Like, a lot of people will pick up older data center switches as like their core and whatnot, and you should be sure that the circuit that you have is actually going to function for that, because it may not. Depending on the venue and all sorts of things, like meeting hall venues are notorious for having lacks of power. Like,
yeah, they like to have 1 or 2 circuits for the entire room.
Right, which will not work. Like, you have to make friends with an electrician. Like the preferably one at the venue that can drop you like some spider boxes or something else. Like and that's just true for your event in general. Like, you have to have sufficient power to run a bunch of computers. It's sort of a venue prerequisite. Even if you have sufficient power, it has to actually like not have 50-year-old breakers like some of the venues.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to piggyback on what Lee said. Your electrician is one of your best friends. I mean, we bribe our 2 electricians every year. We, as staff, we all pitch in to get a gift card, and we usually get him like a 12-pack of his favorite beer. Just like, we want to stay on his good side, because if we have to call him on a Saturday morning early, and he's done, he's off for the weekend, just a little bit of goodwill sometimes. It's like, you know what, I like you guys, I'm gonna, I'll come up. So, and I mean, one other thing is like, knowing your breakers is, you don't want to put your core stuff, be it switches, network, whatever, on anything that an attendee is ever going to touch. Because when somebody comes in and, plugs something in wrong, or they have a short or whatever, if that knocks that row out, okay, that sucks for all that row of people, but you don't want to knock out your entire events network, because you plugged something in that you thought was on a different breaker.
Yeah. Yep. Or they, come in with a rig that is overkill.
Yeah.
1500 watt power supply, to run my 8 video cards and all my RGB.
Yeah, no, they bring a mining rig to come play games. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, one thing you gotta worry about when you're looking at a venue is don't trust the person selling you the venue on what power they have.
Yeah, they'll tell you all sorts of things. It's just not true.
Yep. Verify yourself and check out the breaker panel yourself and see what goes where. Because I made that mistake one of my first venues. They say, "Oh, yeah, we have enough power," and 10 minutes into the event, we lost 2 rows because they were on the same breaker.
Yep. Yeah, if you have questions, get it in writing, because that will sometimes back you up and at least be able to go back to the venue afterwards and say, look, in writing, the contract says we have these many breakers for this much stuff. We got there, it didn't have it, this happened. We're now looking at negotiating that contract again. What can we get back?
Yeah, and if you're talking with the venue sales folks, you can usually say, "Hey, can you put me in contact with your electrician, and can you put me in contact with their, your network folks?" And that then you can have those conversations with them on the side as well. So that also helps.
Yeah, I mean, you will find though that even the people at the venue don't don't necessarily know. It depends on the venue and whether or not they've had sort of high power requirement things hosted there before. Because a lot of the time they have like labels on the circuits that are just wrong, because like no one's ever bothered to validate them, because why we've never popped a breaker. Like, yeah, okay, that's nice. You will pop a breaker here. Like,
we will stress test.
We'll do it for you. Yeah. Like,
so along those lines, I would say capacity management is super important there. Right? That you don't want to stretch anything to the breaking point if you can. when you're checking the circuits out, do I have extra capacity? Are there spares around the corner if I need them fast? And we do the same thing when we're planning the network. We have ambitions where we want 500 people blow the doors off the room, but am I going to be able to deliver that for them when something breaks? Because something always does. So we want to make sure too that we've got spare equipment and spare capacity so that port went bad. I don't care, buy it. I'm going to move it. That switch, somebody spilled their Mountain Dew into it. All right, but I've got a backup because nobody wants to be the person saying, sorry guys, I got no place for you to plug in right now.
Yeah, the having backups is critical, and it's not even just the Mountain Dew. It's like if you've ever moved or shipped equipment, stuff breaks. Like
screws come loose, float around. Yeah.
I mean, that's notorious. There are certain switch manufacturers that I would like to ask where they forgot all the Loctite, like Cisco.
Even
there are other ones that are great, like my Mellanox switches. Every screw is Loctited. The Aristas I've seen, like the screws are Loctited. Like, come on, like, please.
Yeah, we've taken to, when we pull the switches out of the box, given them a good shake.
Yeah, I know. And I've taken to Loctiting some of them. Like, anytime I disassemble one, when I put it back together, right? Like,
if I throw in one more point too, when I'm trying to plan the design, and that's, I need to get with the people planning our event and planning the games and the tournaments and see what they want to play, right? So on the enterprise side, more often than not, the idea is to try to just get the best internet connection to that computer as possible, right? But LAN games don't expect that, and somebody always wants to play StarCraft or something, and they're going, well, how come my buddy over there, I don't see his game? Here's an entire row of people that walk in with Xbox One and then they want to use Wi-Fi, and how do I get in, right? So we need to know what we're planning to be able to account for it, because day of, there's just too many fires to put out, really, to try to change the scope of things. Try to cover your bases at a time.
I'll go ahead and state a controversial thing, which is that for the vast majority of LANs, including up to 500, you can just run it with a flat network, like one subnet. Like, my controversial statement for the day. Like, maybe it's not. Maybe everyone here is running a flat network. Like,
oh no, we changed that. And I agree with you, right? It's so much simpler in a way, right? Why should I have to manage all this segmentation, routing, things I don't need? As icing on top of icing on the cake at that point. But Sean here might say too, we've looked at customers who've gamers. They managed to find things to plug in. I don't know what it is. I've never seen it before, but it sure knows how to break the network, right? NVIDIA Shield was a cool one. I think that we connected that decided, I've got internet, I'm just going to use it all. I'm going to broadcast everything I can and just wreck that segment for everybody who was on it. So segmenting the network buys me the time to get to that row of people and figure out, all right, what happened here, who did what, before they managed to destroy the rest of the room.
The thing we've found in general is, I mean, I don't know that I've ever had anything break the network that way. Normally what we're managing is just outbound bandwidth and consumption therein, whatever the throttlers are set to. And just adjusting those appropriately. The sort of broadcast storm, etc., like thing, I've never had anything super exciting there. Loops you can avoid by configuring your switches in a way that's sane. We've never had that sort of issue. The primary thing that we see is just a lot of times people will come without their games installed, and it's like, But we'll have LAN cache running. We'll have a share with games where they can grab a copy and then run like the Steam Verify. Like they're still DRM'd, like, so it's just you can do a local copy of like some of the popular ones, which is often better than LAN cache. We found
So
what Massive LAN does is right after the network is done and we're going through the QA of the network and so on, we typically leave a PC or two to run game downloads of very popular games.
Pre-cache your cache.
Yeah.
Or precede your cache, rather.
Yeah.
So we should probably...
Makes a huge difference.
Oh, yeah, it does make a huge difference. We should probably explain to the people watching what a LAN cache is.
Yeah, I was about to say, what is a LAN cache? For those of you who don't know.
It's a proxy server that caches games.
That's the short version of it. And for the people that don't know what a proxy server is, I'll try to give the even shorter, not shorter, the longer, but hopefully understandable version, which is that when your PC goes out to get games, it's looking for something by name. And if we can take that name and intercept it and say, go to our server instead, then our server is going to go to the same place and get the game, which doesn't help us the first time. But the second time, if our server has kept that game, when the next game client goes to download, say, Overwatch or Half-Life or whatever, it will get it from our server. And hopefully all the while think that it's getting it from the real server. And that's where when we were talking about setting up a machine ahead of time if you can and just letting it download a whole bunch of games, all of the really popular ones, really helps you in an event. So
yeah, because the caching server is sitting locally, so it often has significantly higher bandwidth, depending on whether or not you're running 10 gig network locally or whatnot, or faster depending on how crazy you are. But the other thing, going back real quick before I forget, to the sort of identifying bad actors on the network thing that I'll say is that having some sort of network monitoring, super helpful. We run a mix of like Libre NMS and a few other things, but it enables me to go from, hey, this is like acting poorly to like this address is acting poorly sort of thing to, hey, this is like the switch port it's sitting on. I know where that switch is. I also get all the rest of sort of like the history for that switch port, can look at it, be like, this has been like the consistent high bandwidth user for the entire LAN. Maybe we should just go talk to them about torrenting at the LAN. But,
I was gonna say we've had that where we give them 2 warnings, and the third time we actually call them by name and say, hey, so and so, turn off your torrent.
So we went through that for years. One of my other cohorts built an internet bandwidth meter, like an actual physical device with a meter that we hung in the middle of the LAN and said, peg it. Let's see what you can do, right? And that became everybody's personal challenge to keep that thing like max. I think it fell off at one point because it was just stuck over there. And then that's great, but we found ourselves in that boat. All of a sudden, nothing was going to work. Nobody could get online. It wasn't torrents anymore. It was just whatever.
Right.
And we ended up having to, kind of evolve things as we went along and employ shaping and bandwidth management at that point, which it saved everything, right? The meter became a heck of a lot less fun after that, but it at least let everybody get online.
So.
And,
the shaping helps a lot. Like we pretty much always run some degree of shaping, even if we've got a full gigabit or whatnot. Like shaping can help a lot, and also giving priority to, say, your LAN cache server. Like it's the most important client on the LAN. Yep, it wins.
Yeah.
And it's really been a big saver for us. It was a huge change for the people coming to the LAN party. And over the last 10, 15 years, as more of us have gotten broadband at home, right? And you take a gigabit, 500 megabit, whatever at home for granted. A lot of us had dial-up, 5 megabit cable modem. So that LAN party was the time to go hog wild, right? Download everything. And we put the shaping in place, and it kind of pulled the rug out from that, underneath it, because we have a gigabit connection, and it's got, there's 3 zeros after that one. That's a really big number. But when you have 300 people running at the same time, the slice you're going to get a lot smaller.
Yeah.
So it gave us something more to do, right, to try to manage that, right? Give the cache a bigger slice of the pie, and let it be more effective with the bandwidth. But now we have streamers that are coming to the event, and they're raising money for charity, right? So we want to make sure that they have bandwidth available to them. And then the poor souls with the game downloads, or worse yet, and I'm glad the LAN cache helps us here, they need to install Windows because they just bought the parts for that computer. They need that, right? They need the opportunity for me to kind of go over and say, hang on, let me give you a bigger piece of the pie, and we'll get you going. And that has been a great tool for us. Just a gigabit's not enough. If we had 100 gig, I bet you some people would find a way to use it all.
They'll find a way to use the bandwidth. Yep.
Yeah, and some of those things like Windows installs, it helps to, besides the game cache, LAN cache, to have things like physical Windows install media, so you can at least get them out of the way.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. But then there's also been some drawbacks to the caches as well. For example, at Massive LAN, we've had issues with Origin, for example, where if you try to run it through the cache, because their downloads are encrypted by HTTPS, you can't intercept it because of their HTTPS configuration. It's using something called HSTS. So what ends up happening is nobody can log into Origin until we get Origin out of going through the LAN cache. But the side effect is any Origin downloads end up going right to the internet pipe. We basically can't do a thing about that. Well, we can, but it's not feasible for an event.
Yeah, you can watch the game drip into the computer slowly.
Yeah. So getting back to talking about hardware, we talked about the core. So say somebody's wanting to set up a LAN party, they've never, they've been to them, but they've never set one up. What are they looking for that, that core, that main hub?
Whatever they can get their hands on. I mean, that's the short answer. Like, the longer answer is it sort of depends on how involved you are and how dedicated you are and what your budget looks like. Like the fact is, it would be nice to have something greater than 1 gig uplinks from your table switches up. Like, but it's not really a prerequisite unless you have a LAN cache server that can dish out 20 gigabit to the network with like NVMe drives. So like if you have a high budget and you are going to buy NVMe drives and a fancy cache server with enough cores to saturate 40 gigabit link to your switch, then you want to switch with 40 gigabit and a bunch of 10 gig to table switches and the whole thing. If on the other hand you have some leftover PC that you're going to use as your LAN cache server and you're going to hold the LAN for 50 people with a 100 megabit connection or something, literally whatever switch you found off the back of a truck at the PC surplus store is just fine. Like, it sort of depends on your scale and budget and all sorts of other things, right?
I would ask you guys what you think the limit of a plug and play network is. If you're growing a LAN, let's assume you're not using the thing that the ISP gave you, or the 1999 router that will melt into a puddle, once you've plugged a few people into the thing. But I've got some switch ports. I've got a router. Maybe, it's got to at least have however many LEDs or something, so that it's the reasonably robust. But how far can you go with that nowadays? And just plug the router into the switch, plug everybody's computer into it. Don't trip over the cords. Can you get 50 people with that? Is that too much at this point?
I mean, I think you can get 50 people. Is it going to be enjoyable for 50 people? It should be fine for 50. I mean, obviously, the more you go, the more painful it's going to be.
Yeah, I think what it really is, it also boils down to like how well those 50 people are going to follow instructions. Like, the fact is, like, most consumer gear doesn't deal well with, say, a loop or whatnot. There's a few things that simple things that if they don't do it, it'll all be fine. And then there are things where if the people at the LAN just happen to do it, it'll all go horribly, horribly wrong. So I mean, the short answer is it depends. You could get very unlucky. You could get very lucky. Like, could go either way.
Yeah, I would say with consumer grade equipment, you wouldn't want to go above 50 or a 48 port switch.
Yeah.
Once you start going past that, then you're going to want to look into getting more of a small business switch or a Cisco, something that can handle the traffic, and then your edge device, firewall, not a $50 Linksys from the Best Buy that, like I said, it's just going to melt into a puddle. You're going to want to go a little bit more enterprise grade firewall.
Yeah. I mean, you can get away with something pretty cheap at the edge, depending on what your connection is, right? Like that's going to be dependent on how many packets you're going to be able to push through in the first place.
Yeah, and you can also go with like prosumer, like mid grade can get you there too for on a budget and still be fine.
Yeah, totally. Like the Ubiquiti Edge router series is relatively inexpensive and can easily push a gigabit. It can push 10 gig in some cases for the higher end edge routers. That if you're looking to do it on a true budget, like you can just run pfSense on commodity hardware and you can push a lot of packets through that, or for that matter, just Linux running on, like if you hate BSD for whatever reason, you can run Linux instead. Either way, like commodity hardware these days is so fast. You can push a lot of packets with commodity hardware and 10 gig networking cards on either side. So like most venues you're not going to get above a gigabit. So sort of planning for that is sort of the upper end of what I would plan for. If you suddenly find a venue that's willing to hand you 10 gig for like some price that isn't absolutely insane, call us. Please.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Because most of them will ask,
because we want your venue too.
There are some instances too where, hey, you may not get a gig, but this goes beyond some of the commodity hardware you can get. Let's say you have 2 internet connections that you can use, and you have goals like, okay, you want to prioritize your streamers, you want to prioritize your back office operations like registration. You can utilize things like policy-based routing. You can utilize physical network separation, things like that.
Yeah,
and pipes.
pfSense or Linux is very capable of that, but outside of running that, if you have your random Linksys or Netgear or whatever, and you haven't put a custom firmware on it, they aren't dealing with multi-WAN. They don't do that. So.
And I also wanted to point out too that yes, if you're router shopping, your key is to look for packets per second in processing, which is what a lot of routers are marketed by. They're not marketed by how many gigabits per second it can push, because not all packets are the same.
Yeah, it's going to depend significantly on packet size. Like it's sort of always the case. I mean, in general, you can mostly do the math at full size packets, like hopefully. But you just have to be aware that if it can do a gigabit at 1500 byte packets, it might not be able to at like 80 byte packets.
And if you can find used enterprise stuff, that's probably the best way to go, because they're going to get a lot of places just kind of throw away oh, this is only a 100 meg switch, we don't need that, and they but for something like
I don't need that either.
I throw some controversy in on that one. I was just going to bring that up, right? So if you're assuming you're asking somebody who's got a bunch of friends and they want to start this up, the consumer level gear, right? And it's just, we know where that goes, and there's like a danger zone where you're not going to quite know when you're going to melt the thing, but it's there, it's looming. And you start shopping for something a little bit more robust. And you mentioned the prosumer. That's still in the realm of, I can read this instructions, I can look at the numbers, I can handle this, and I get a guaranteed output from it. The enterprise stuff, I think, at least in routing too, can get people into trouble if they don't really know that. If you go and find, here's the turquoise box, the Cisco logo, great, that's, look how big that is. It's got to be fast, right? And then you hook it up and find out that, well, I plugged a gigabit in here, but I can get 250 megabit out. What's happening? How come it's not routing, natting, those sort of things start to get way beyond the entry level, where it takes a little bit of time and testing. And unfortunately, for somebody like myself who doesn't touch all that day in and day out, the tests happen live. So I can only be so dangerous when I put these things together to find out how far to take.
I mean, looking up the spec sheet and understanding it before you buy it is probably the thing I'll say here. Just because it's Cisco or Juniper or whatever doesn't mean that it's recent Cisco or Juniper or whatever. Like, and even the same model number doesn't actually necessarily mean things, depending on if it's like a switch that's loaded with modules. Yeah, it matters what the modules are in that switch. Like, they can be everything from,
Just do this a little bit with my friends, and they're going to that, okay, maybe I'm at that melting point for that device and I need to go to the next step. I think if I was building out that bill of materials, I would start with a super micro makes some like boxes that are purpose built for making turning into a router, and they're the ones, because they're tiny and they have 4 at least copper ports and 2 SFPs. So if you go to the Supermicro website, pick one of those, it'll probably do the job, or run it by one of us, and we'll go, yeah, that's a good one. And then install either OPN Sense or PF Sense, or one of the other just really good pre-done. Just install this distribution and change a few settings, and you're ready to go.
OpenWrt.
Yeah.
Whatever.
And then for the switch, one of the Ubiquity like 24 or 48 port switches with the the 2 SFP plus ports. Grab one of those, because the licensing on those is free, so you don't have to worry about any of that. And that's pretty good. That'll get you to that next level. The beyond 50. It's can expand past that, and if your event grows, you just buy a little beefier firewall and get a switch that's actually made for a core, and hang your Ubiquity that you used as the core off of it as an edge switch, and grow that way. It's a good way to do it.
Don't be afraid to Frankenstein your network, especially when you're starting off. You're going to get a bunch of things that are kind of clunky, that aren't the best. But as you grow, as you can get maybe staff to get donations in, or you get, work with an enterprise that's able to give you stuff like, okay, everything sucks, but we're good. Next, in the next land, okay, well, we got this awesome new switch in, so we can replace the switch. Now our edge switch still sucks, but we've got stuff. And so don't feel like you have to run out and spend, $20,000 to get everything awesome. Start off small, work your way up, year after year.
Yeah, there's some very inexpensive equipment you can get, even new, the Ubiquity stuff, but the old, it works just fine. Like, you just need to make sure you have a backup or two. But like, you can pick up switches that are gigabit with 10 gig uplink for sub $50 on eBay, sort of thing, right? Like the You know, and you know, it's one of those things where could you probably find something to flash on them that supports SSH? Yeah, like, but why bother, right? Like, you're running it for a LAN event. Like, the attack surface is not something that you're super worried about. Like, you know, if the actor is bad enough, you just ask them to leave the LAN. Like, you know, there's limits to how much you want to, you know, sort of go there, right? But
it's also the law of diminishing results too. So, for example,
totally.
like Massive LAN has wireless that was added to accommodate clients that don't have wired
Nintendo switches.
Yes, Nintendo Switches, laptops, and so on. Like, you don't really need fancy access points for that, but you have to, you know, keep in mind that at some point you're going to need some level of management. You're going to need some level of insight. For example, Massive LAN uses some of the cheapest Ubiquiti AC APs you can get, and it works great.
I was going to ask.
Ubiquiti is by far not the cheapest APs, but they're great. So,
yeah,
you know,
right. I mean, you can go Aruba, you can go, you know.
Oh, sorry. They're not the most expensive either. You can get a lot more expensive.
Yeah. I was going to ask if you guys touch wireless, because that was the Pandora's box for me. Was we had somebody years ago show up with the DS, you know, and say, can I play with this? Do we have wireless in here? And I went, you know, I got this little home router. Let me just duct tape it to the wall, right? And then all of a sudden, 70 people had the password. It didn't work. And we kind of went from there, where we went from, you know, controlled chaos with the wired network to just whatever was going to happen with wireless. And as everybody's computer gets stacked with RGB, you know, devices, wireless keyboards, headsets, right? The ability of that network to operate, you know, you're fighting things you can't see, right? It's invisible radio waves. Yeah. Do you guys try? Do you use a Vendy wireless? Do you just go, I don't know, you know, is it even worth tackling something like that?
So we added wireless to our event. I used an old Aerohive access point that I got attending one of their sales webinars, but we limited it to cell phones and strictly internet access. We didn't give them access to the local network, so that way people didn't have to use their data for their phones. But if they wanted to play games or do anything local at the LAN, they had to plug in physically.
See, we do actually allow people on the network. We basically break up into usually like 4 or 5 access points. Obviously, when you start getting more than one access point, or you're in an area that's very crowded, you know, with Wi-Fi, you do need to be careful about how you set it up. You know, don't just necessarily stick it on auto and just set, you know, transmission strength high. You know, that could give you a lot of issues. You know. People think like, oh, it's super high. That's great. That means everybody can hear everything. It's like, well, you can also start running into issues of starting to cause interference with your stealth. So you need to play around with that sometimes, play around with channels and try to figure that out. And sometimes you can't fix it. You know, sometimes it's not going to be perfect and people need to have that expectation. So, you know, while we have it at our events, we don't advertise it. So if somebody comes up, you know, we're usually like, look, we've got it, but it's not necessarily going to be perfect. You know, what can you do? You know, hey, next time you show up, see if you can get some type of, you know, USB or, you know, USB-C network adapter or something like that. But even for staff, what's really nice for staff is we can run around with our laptops, you know, sit down with somebody to try to figure it out instead of like, all right, where's an open port on this switch? Crap, it's all filled. What am I going to do? So that's, you know, that's one way we look at it.
Yeah, if you do plan to have multiple access points, you want some kind of management interface so they'll work together. And they will have clients to each other. Otherwise, like I said, you'll have a lot of interference between the access points. So don't just go pick up a bunch of, you know, consumer grade, you know, routers and throw it on for wireless.
Yeah, and then for channel selection and all that, for wireless engineering, for folks that are trying to figure that out, you can get by on the like 3-page, you know, someone's 3-page document that they wrote, you know, that's posted, you know, just Google that and, you know, 5 gigahertz is where you should try to put all your clients and read through someone's 3-page, you know, tutorial on how to do that. You should be okay.
Yeah, the thing I'll say about wireless, I mean, it's RF's lots of fun. If you're interested in RF, there's a rabbit hole you can go down. On the other hand, you know, keeping it simple, It is easier if you have a management interface or access points that are controllable together, stuff like the Ubiquity gear. But if you have just some consumer crap playing around and you don't have the budget for other things, it can be made to work. You just have to put in some effort. Especially if you actually want roaming between access points to work. It's significant effort with consumer gear. You typically end up on custom firmware, etc., to make it all happy. But like, it's doable. Like, if you have time but not budget, you can make it work. Like, don't think that you have to go buy fancy access points. That said, if you can buy like a pair of Ubiquities, they'll cover a huge portion of your venue. And if you for most reasonable venue sizes. And if you set their transmit power appropriately and position them appropriately, I do recommend looking at the antenna pattern for the access point you bought, because you'll be surprised at what direction it goes, especially for some of the Ubiquities. So the fact is you can cover a venue pretty well with that sort of thing. I agree that you shouldn't advertise your wireless. And one of the things that Nick's LAN does that I really like is that they have Ethernet cables for everyone, like just already out there and easy to go. And one of the things we've taken to is I always bring my bag of random USB Ethernet adapters that I've collected over the years, and I hand them out like candy. And like sometimes they come back to me, and if they don't, oh well. Like someone got an Ethernet adapter, hopefully they'll bring it to the next LAN. Like that's all I'm hoping, right? Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
The pile of USB Ethernet adapters. If you can find a pile of USB Ethernet adapters on eBay for cheap, I'll tell you, you can. You might consider purchasing some just to keep people off the wireless. Like, they work okay. They're not great, but like they're better than what polluting the shared channel. Like that's the thing people sometimes don't seem to realize is even with all the fanciness in new wireless, it's still mostly shared. It's less true than it used to be. 802.11 in AC, etc., with beamforming and whatnot. It's like a little bit less shared than it was before, but it's still a shared medium. There's a lot of very fancy tricks to pack more bits into the same physical bandwidth. And this is one of those cases where I'll actually use bandwidth because it actually is appropriate.
Yeah. And sometimes what I'll do, just because I don't want to have to deal with some of the problems, is I'll just turn off 2.4 gigahertz. Because
we do, but people come in with we've had legacy consoles, right, and then they don't have 5. And one gentleman had a computer case with Wi-Fi controlled fans that he couldn't control unless his computer and his phone could be on 2.4. One thing you said earlier, though, which it really is important, I think, and this I always have to tell myself this after the event is over, is to keep it as simple as possible when you can. I would love to have had a scrolling thing next to me the whole time here with like all the features and functions I've added into everything in the network, but every one of those is probably another hour of sleep I don't get somehow during one of these events because Sean here might not know what crazy thing I did, and when it stops working at 1:30 in the morning, they're going to come find me and wake me up, right? You end up kind of being responsible for holding everything together at that point.
Keep it as simple as you can so that other people can deal with it. Like,
it's
100%.
It's also worth pointing out, though, that if you do make changes, it's good to keep a change log where everybody can see it.
Yep.
So that if a negative change occurred or the network blew up the next day, you can backtrack your steps and figure out what in the config, what in the setup died. And
one thing...
Wireless is especially true at that because no wireless client's made the same. Nobody implements the wireless stack on their device the same way. So again, wireless is a bigger rabbit hole.
Yeah, one thing that we do, basically as soon as our network is up and running, usually either the day before or the day of, like take a backup immediately. and then save that somewhere. Don't touch it. Don't do anything with it, but have it in case something stupid happens. Your router just blows up and you got to pull the backup one, and then you're remembering, oh crap, I didn't set up the network on the backup router. You can just throw that in there, and it may not be perfect. The changes you made on Saturday, aren't reflected because this was a backup from Friday, but you're 90% there instead of people down for 3 hours while you're setting everything up. People are only down for a half hour.
And get a backup at the end too, so you have a starting point for your next event.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Saving your configs matters. Even most consumer gear hardware will let you export configs. Like it's super helpful. The other thing I'll say is if you're buying enterprise grade hardware, save your config before you even power it off the first time. Because there's a non-zero probability that the flash in your enterprise everyone's making uncomfortable noises here because they know that the flash in your enterprise hardware has failed, and it'll say it wrote a config, but it's lying.
The other drawback of consumer gear is a lot of consumer gear also encrypts their configs, so it's tied to that specific device.
Yes.
That depends on the consumer gear. Most of the time, those are also consumer gear that you can replace the firmware with something more reasonable, like OpenWrt. And I would recommend that even if you have consumer gear, that you consider biting the bullet of replacing the firmware on your device with something that you have more control over, especially if like it's your only option sort of thing.
I mean, if you've got something that can't do a backup on, the absolute worst case, it sucks still, but take screenshots. Just literally pull up the config, either in PuTTY or the web, whatever it is, take screenshots of everything. Just click through everything, take screenshots, and that'll be helpful. So there's things that we know that we're going to be changing throughout the LAN. We don't want to just load a full config every single time. We'll take screenshots of that, and that just works like, all right, what do we change here? Oh, this is what was changed,
Yeah.
Right.
My flash memory fails between LANs too, right? So I have to go back there and see what the heck was I thinking.
Keep notes for yourself, because you will forget at 3 a.m. what the heck you did. Before.
Yeah. So we could talk about this stuff for hours, but we are running out of time. So any last words for somebody looking to start up a LAN?
I got one last thing. Label your equipment in the order that you had it in. So when you use it for the next LAN, you can put it in the same order and have less of a setup.
Just say if you're going to label, if you can just throw that diagram that you had laid out, okay, this was switch 1. What did it look like before? Oh, that was over here. Because if you have it labeled switch 1, all right, where was 1? Was it all the way at this end, or was it all the way at the other end? So having a diagram, just throw it in the case with all your switches and everything is helpful.
The number one thing I'll say is it can be intimidating to run a LAN or a network for a LAN. Don't be afraid of it. You'll get it done. Your users / the gamers at your LAN will appreciate anything you can do to make their lives better. They'll appreciate the fact you're running the LAN. If you need help with stuff, people here and all throughout the internet are available. There's tons of resources
Don't be afraid to ask for help if you're in a down situation and you're freaking out. Ask someone for help if you need it. There will always be someone that can help you.
Yeah, get a LAN buddy.
I would also say it helps to help yourself too. So a big thing is, especially when it comes down to documenting and labeling stuff, have physical copies of things. So one thing we do is, we need to eyeball where stuff is plugged into on a switch. You don't want to bring your laptop console in and so on. It helps to just have a layout of it's configured this way, plug stuff in this way, everything's labeled. You can just quickly eyeball it with the flashlight. And that helps a lot with bigger events.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Like you said, take your time, get a LAN buddy, make sure somebody else knows what you did, and they're going to be there to help, whether you're asleep. This stuff gets stressful if everybody in the room is looking at you and it's not working, and maybe you got to take a break for half a second, and come back and attack the problem again. Have some help. I mean,
and also don't be afraid of your attendees. Sometimes they know things. Like, turns out that they also often work in the computing industry. Who knew?
That's
Yeah.
actually, it's actually how Adam and I got hooked up and how I became a helper for Master.
It's how I did too. So
Yeah, that's how I met Lee. Is hey, this isn't working, and Lee said, I think I know a way to fix this. I was like, fix it. Please.
Yes.
For finding problems. Like there have been problems I've found with the network while attending, and I've helped offer suggestions and help fix them so the event runs smoother for everybody.
Yep, we're all in it together. Make it happen, right?
Well, I just want to thank you guys for taking time to give us a little peek into what it takes to run a LAN network. Feel free to post questions and stuff in the LANFest Discord. Sure, plenty of people are out there that can help you answer stuff. And keep enjoying LFGX 2021. Play some games, have some fun, and we will talk to you guys later.
Thanks all.
Yeah. Bye.